Hallo Leute und herzlich willkommen zu Let's Play The Stanley Parable, eine HFF2 Mod, und das wird auch gleich mein Start wieder ins Let's Player-Leben werden, weil ist eine ziemlich ruhige Mod, aber auch eine ziemlich geile Hammer-Mod von der Story her. Sie ist komplett auf Englisch leider, es gibt auch keine deutschen Untertitel, also wer das, also hier steht zwar Untertitel, aber das geht hier leider nicht, weil stecken hier, weil das eine Half-Life 2 Mod ist und es ist halt das Menü von Half-Life, und bei Half-Life kann man das halt einstellen. Aber hier nicht, denn es ist ja nicht Half-Life, es ist ja das Stanley Parable. Was soll ich sagen? Genau. Es ist ein ziemlich ruhiges Spiel, eine ziemlich geile Story. Leider komplett auf Englisch. Für die Leute, die halt nicht Englisch können, für die könnte ich vielleicht nachher nochmal später übersetzen. Bei den letzten Parts, damit man es vielleicht so ein bisschen versteht, weil anfangs jetzt nicht. Ich spiele es komplett blind. Okay, außer einem Weg, den habe ich mir mal angeguckt bei einem LP. Ja, ich gucke andere LPs, ja. Ich gucke nicht meine eigenen Videos, nein. Vor allem jetzt nicht mehr, wo ich alle gelöscht habe. Und dann würde ich einfach mal sagen, nicht mehr viel quatschen, dann fangen wir einfach mal an. Und über ein neues Spiel starten. Und der erstmal noch laden tut. Aber da stehen wir drauf. Wir stehen da drüber. Wir sind mächtig episch.
This is the story of a man named Stanley. Stanley worked for a company in a big building where he was employee number 427. Employee number 427's job was simple. He sat at his desk in room 427 and he pushed buttons on a keyboard. Orders came to him through a monitor next to his desk, telling him what buttons to push, how long to push them, and in what order. This is what employee 427 did every day of every month of every year. And although others might have considered it soul-rending, Stanley relished every moment that the orders came in, as though he had been made exactly for this job. And Stanley was happy. And then one day something very peculiar happened. Something that would forever change Stanley. Something he would never quite forget. He had been at his desk for nearly an hour when he realized that not one single order had arrived on a monitor for him to follow. No one had showed up to give him instructions, call a meeting, or even say hi. Never in all his years at the company had this happened, this complete isolation. Something was very clearly wrong. Shocked, frozen solid, Stanley found himself unable to move for the longest time. But as he came to his wits and regained his senses, he got up from his desk and walked out into the hallway.
Wir sind Stanley. Falls ihr das nicht mitbekommen habt, dann gehen wir.
Stanley decided to go to the staff lounge to check on his co-workers. He never functioned well by himself and constantly needed support and guidance from others, so the thought of total solitude was terrifying to him. When Stanley came to a set of two open doors, he entered the door on his left. As Stanley entered the lounge, he was horrified to find not a single person here. He decided he would walk up to see his boss, hoping that he would find an answer there. Coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office. Entering his manager's office, Stanley was once again stunned to discover not an indication of any human life. It was at this point that he began to feel dizzy and a little sick, and even thought he might pass out when suddenly he noticed a keypad next to the filing cabinet in the corner of his boss's office. Stanley had never seen this panel before and had no idea what combination of numbers would produce any result. In fact, only Stanley's boss knew this, since the panel withheld access to the boss's greatest, darkest secret, and so he had assigned the keypad a combination that only he could possibly know, the number of his freshman dorm number in college, 195. 5-7. But of course, yet incredibly, by simply pushing random buttons on the keypad, Stanley happened to input the correct code by sheer luck. Amazing. Stanley ventured forth into the newly opened passageway. As he drew deeper into the bowels of the building, Stanley had no idea where he was or what this place held. And just as he began to think he might not discover a thing, he emerged into a long room to find rows and rows of monitors, screens with a number above it. Stanley noticed, however, that these were not random numbers, but the number of employees who worked in the building, his co-workers. Even his own number, 427, had a place on the wall. But why a setup so elaborate, he asked. Was this simple surveillance or something even more? And as if in answer to his question, the wall slid open before him, revealing the ultimate truth of the situation. An enormous control panel Stanley discovered, but not one that controlled simple machinery. Buttons were labeled with emotions: happy, sad. Levers and knobs controlled actions: walking, eating, doing work, or watching TV. Every input on this device monitored not the functions of a machine, but of a human being. And the reality began to sink in. Stanley, like so many other people, reduced to images on a monitor, had been under someone's control, always at the mercy of this machine. Could this have been the only reason employee number 427 was content with his boring job? That a machine had altered his emotions to accept it blindly? He began to feel an unbridled rage, and at the peak of his anger, something happened. A spark. Stanley looked up and saw the generator overhead, still providing some small amount of power to the machine, keeping it alive. And knowing that this generator was all that kept the controls running, Stanley moved to the ladder in the back of the room and began to climb towards the rafters. The higher Stanley climbed, the closer he felt to freedom, the further from enslavement. Blackness, power gone, all alone, and then... As he stepped through the door into the fresh outside air, a feeling of liberation rushed through Stanley's body. He had seen power, he had seen enslavement, and he had destroyed it. The underling was in control now. He had found his leading role. Stanley never discovered why everyone had gone missing, nor how and when he had come under the machine's control. But it didn't upset him terribly, because he knew that this was how things were meant to happen. All he felt was a delight unlike any he had ever known before. Never again would he follow someone else's orders without question. Never again would anyone tell Stanley where to go, what to do, or how to feel. No more bosses, no more instructions on a screen. Stanley decides for himself now. And he stepped out into the world, and he felt the cool breeze upon his skin, and Stanley was happy.
Was ist jetzt? Credits oder? Ah. Da Wave Redden. Das ausspricht man Reden. Das sind Reden. Kevin Brighton. Kevin Brighton. Colin Eddings. Mit Anstehen. Lil. Music, die wirklich toll ist. Also ich finde sie toll. Also nicht toll finde, das ist einfach nur dumm. Thomas Newman. Gordon Freeman. Natürlich guckt man sich Credits beim ersten Mal noch an. German Translation, was? Wo? Bitteschön. Wo? Ganz ehrlich, wo? Geh weg. Option mal nachgucken. Audio. Deutsch, Dialoge, keine Ahnung. Dann Leute. Das war der erste Teil von Stanley Parable und ich werde diesen Part, denke ich mal, gleich hochladen. Und die nächsten Parts, die kommen in den nächsten paar Tagen. Okay.